2%. Japan, very, very tough, great people. And again, I don't blame the people for doing it. I think they're very smart in doing it. I blame the people that sat right in that Oval Office, right over there, right behind the Resolute desk or whichever desk they chose. Japan, 46%. They would charge us 46%.
If you are still watching, we thank you. If you are watching and you are confused, we're here to help you. I'm going to bring into our coverage Bloomberg News anchor and correspondent David Gura. David, let me do a little bit of fact-checking thanks to our friends over at the New York Times. Just on the trade deficits that he keeps talking about. Times reports that Trump talks about the trade deficits the United States has amassed with other countries and says, quote, we're really not taking it anymore. The trade deficit is the difference between what a country exports and imports. The U.S. has long imported more goods than it exports. Trump said his tariffs offered an example of his administration standing up for our great farmers and ranchers. As a reminder, though, the administration had to offer special federal aid to farmers who were hurt by his trade war with China during his first term. The White House recently discussed doing that again. The 25% tariff on cars and car parts that Trump is talking about goes into effect just after midnight. The United Auto Workers Union is a strong supporter of those tariffs. But auto companies and economists have said they will lead to significantly higher car prices and could even slow U.S. auto production in the short run with supply chain issues. I want to also talk about, this is all sort of a cherry-picked selection, but the Times also with this fact check, quote, Trump is mentioning many high tariffs that other countries put on American products, but not the high tariffs that the United States charges on certain products. And then they go through the list of things we are, I guess, in Trump's narrative on the other side of the tariff dynamic. In terms of nodding to the fact that none of his economic advisors prior to serving in Donald Trump's cabinet ever advocated for tariffs, talk about what has been put in place so far today.
So we're going to learn more details here, probably not from the chart that the president is holding up there, but we know that there's going to be this 10% universal tariff. This is something that he talked about a lot on the campaign trail, and he's characterizing the reciprocal tariffs that he's putting in place here is kind of benevolent, as less than they could have been. He could have gone full, he said, but he didn't. But what's going to be interesting to watch here is how all of these trading partners, these countries respond to what the president is putting in place. And you bring up the auto tariffs, for instance. This is something that he talked about before, so he's kind of couching this as a novel announcement today. We knew that those were going to be put in place, those 25% tariffs on foreign imports of automobiles and parts. You're right to point out that these are economic advisors who aren't well known for espousing a lot of interest in or hope for these tariffs before they got into that position. But what we've heard from the White House time and time again is this is an economic team that has walked in line here with the president who, as we know and we've known for so long, really believes in the power of these tariffs, despite in a lot of cases what consensus tells us, what most economists say the effects of these tariffs are going to be. So, again, it'll be interesting to see sort of what the response is now that we have this announcement. And so the story that we've talked about over these last many weeks, Nicole, is just the level of uncertainty that this process has kind of infused into markets and the economy and the way that countries act and regard the United States. There's a bit more clarity here. I think that you're seeing kind of in the market response that we're seeing in the futures market, some relief. Probably these tariffs aren't as big as perhaps many investors worried or thought they might be. But again, this is kind of the beginning stage of sort of figuring out what happens next and how open this president is negotiating around these tariffs as well. I think that we haven't heard much from him yet in this speech in the Rose Garden about his appetite for doing that. And I'll just say lastly, this has been the open question that a lot of investors and observers have had over the course of his second term. Are these negotiating gambits? Is this a mechanism by which companies and sectors and countries will have an opportunity to kind of work with the White House to figure out a trade deal that's palatable to the White House? I don't think that we know that yet, Nicole.
I wonder, because tariffs are so unpopular and, in the view of economists, ineffective as economic tools, it's worth explaining that they are regressive taxes, that annual losses for households at the bottom of the income distribution would range from about $1,900 to $2,400. Food prices will go up 1.85%. For all of those voters who were agitated by the price of things like eggs, tariffs, and this isn't any sort of partisan analysis that we've eyeballed here, but tariffs indisputably will make things more expensive.
You know, the thing to which economists look is the Smoot-Hawley Act from 1930. That was seen as a colossal mistake by the U.S. government putting those broad-based tariffs in place. And I should say they were put in place by Congress. That's not what's happening here. This is the president doing this unilaterally, but of course with the support of the Republican Party, but not done by Congress. That was seen as a cautionary tale for many decades of protectionism. And so we've learned lessons from that. Over almost a whole century, this flies in the face of that. And so you're right to bring up the fact that if you look at that as a guideline, if you look at kind of traditional mainstream economics as a guideline here, the result of that is these tariffs are going to be inflationary. They're going to lead to higher prices. And you heard the president in his remarks nodding to the fact that his administration is focused on lowering prices and intends to do so, echoing what he said on the campaign trail. But most economists would say this is not going to do that. This is going to complicate matters even more. And I thought an interesting allowance was from that worker from the UAW, who was part of, I think, the founder of that group, UAW Auto Workers for Trump. He says he can't wait to see what happens in 3 months or 6 months or in a few years. I think that there is a new reckoning with, a new realization of the fact that this is going to lead to short-term, perhaps medium-term pain. And I was struck as the president spoke, as that auto worker spoke, about this blind hope that what's going to happen here is a real influx of onshoring, of bringing manufacturing jobs back to this country. I should say that's something that we really have no details on, how the administration thinks that's going to happen. And again, kind of dwelling on the timetable for all of this. If that's what this White House wants to do, that's not something that can happen with any speed. And I think a lot of economists would say that's kind of folly to think that that could happen in any kind of short order, Nicole.